Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. I'm Hannah Brakke. I'm the director of product here at LabKey. And today we're going to be talking about LabKey's mining limbs and kind of diving into a demo there. Maybe just some quick housekeeping. We are going to be recording this demo today, and we'll be sending it out after it's processed. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I've got it open here and I'll try and sort of keep tabs on it as I'm going. I really want this to be as interactive as possible. Looks like somebody sort of raised their hand, so feel free to kind of add your question in the chat if you've got one, and we'll continue to sort of monitor that as we go through. So today, I'm really excited to walk you through how LabKey LIMS can really support metallurgy teams in managing their data more efficiently. And especially in mining, the journey from pit to plant can be very data intensive. Every assay, every sample, and every test can really contribute to that decision making. But often that information can be really scattered. So spreadsheets or paper notes, or those instrument generated files aren't always fitting together very nicely, or even that consolidated in terms of being able to trace what's happened. And so our goal in this session is really to show you how LabKey can help you connect those dots and give you that traceability and insights from the moment a sample sort of comes out of the ground all the way through sort of the processing. So a little bit about LabKey before we get started. We've been around for over 20 years supporting data management in a variety of different scientific disciplines, including mining and metallurgy. Our software is intentionally designed to be very flexible and intuitive. So that really helps make sure that the system matches your lab. And we'll see that in the demo today, and we'll talk about that. And it's much easier then for scientists of all kinds to use and adopt within the system. And what makes LabKey different compared to other LIMS providers is that we're really not just a software vendor. We see ourselves as a partner in science. And that means we really spend the time to understand how your lab works, help configure those workflows to fit your reality, and support you all the way through sort of adoption and eventual maintenance. So let's talk a little bit about these metallurgical labs. So you guys all deal with this high sample throughput, hundreds or even thousands of samples a week, and that can lead to sort of a lot of manual data entry, which can create delays or potentially errors, and then slow down that ultimate sort of reporting or decision-making process that folks may have. There's also these multi-step procedures, such as drilling, crushing, splitting, digestion, ICP-MS, so that whole chain of steps. And without sort of that standardization, workflows can get a really inconsistent, and that data can become fragmented kind of as teams are handing it off, or within a team, even depending on sort of the size of the group. And then the last piece is sort of this critical assay data component. And so if there is data that goes missing or the chain of custody isn't really clear, the confidence in the results can really suffer. And that can have serious downstream impacts, I'm sure, as all of us know here. And so this is exactly where a LIMS software can help step in and support teams. It can streamline that data capture, ensure that traceability, and really standardize workflows so that your data is reliable and accessible. And so how is our LabKey LIMS really addressing some of those challenges that we just talked about? Well, it's got a very flexible sample and storage management component, which means you get to define the custom sample types, drill cores, pulps, composite, whatever sort of fits your process and the language that you guys are using in your lab, and really tracks them across the full life cycle. It also has the standardized workflows and a connected ELN. These templates and linked lab notebook entries can really ensure those processes are consistent over time, and you can capture all of the steps in things like sample preps or pulverization and really tie those directly into your data to understand that final result a little bit more comprehensively. And then lastly, we have sort of this integrated assay data management and reporting component. And so instead of sort of manually moving files around, LabKey can ingest that instrument data, harmonize it with sample metadata, and give you sort of built-in visualizations so you can see trends or analyses in real time. And at the end of the day, it's really about sort of centralizing all of this data and standardizing it. And so samples, workflows, results, reports, all of these can be kind of in that single LabKey LIMS connected system. And so today for the demo, I really kind of want to work through a concrete example to help us see how our LIMS can help. And so if you imagine a typical sort of drill core sample making its way through the lab, you can start with this collection and logging, and then it might move through sort of drying, crushing, splitting, and pulverization. And then from there might be sort of aliquoting or deriving of these pulp samples for this acid digestion for ultimate ICP-MS analysis. And so that can end up being a lot of moving parts at each of these different steps within the system. And so you start to lose confidence in results if there's sort of missing data or poor handoffs. And so with LabKey, you can really sort of use workflows to help capture these high-level tasks. And through our Lineage component, be able to see how a drill core sample has been processed over time, as well as where those additional samples might live within the organization or the lab. And then being able to capture the ICP or the assay results directly and associate them with samples. And then, of course, any sort of centralization of experiment framework in an electronic lab notebook, which can be a very good replacement for sort of paper notes or text write-ups. And so now that we kind of have this this big picture, I want to jump into sort of the demo here. And let's see. Yeah, perfect. So as a worker in our fake mining LIMS lab, I'm able to log into the system and see the different samples that we have within our organization. And it's important to note that me as an administrator has defined things like drill core, composite pulp, digestate, leach residue. And all of these things can be sort of defined by an administrator at your organization. Certainly within sort of our other mining customers, they have their own language that they've chosen to sort of capture here. And it's a very sample-centric system. So that really means that we're able to see everything that has come through the laboratory rather than kind of what's current, and allows us to go back in time and analyze results or create reports for billing purposes or other things. And so that sample-centric notion also means that we have different statuses for these samples. And this, again, is something that I've customized as an administrator to sort of indicate the different statuses of samples within our organization. I'm able to see the places where we store samples. And so here is a list of some of the recent locations that I've been in to store samples, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But important to note here as well, similarly with the sample components, our storage is also fully customizable by an administrator. So the language that I'm using may not be language that you're using. You may choose to capture it differently. I can see sort of the in-progress ELNs or notebooks that I'm working on, as well as the workflow job. And so here, this is where I'm going to really capture the work of that drill core sample processing. And so if I go into this lab meeting demo, I'm able to see the template that I created this workflow job from. And so this is really a standardized set of tasks that has been set by an administrator on what drill core crushing and digestion means to our fake LabKey lab. As part of that template, we have sort of set tasks that we'll go through. We have job owners. So right now I am the owner of the job. I've got Will on my notify list. I can add Bernie. And as soon as I sort of add him, he's going to get notified of this work, get an email, as well as get emails letting him know how the progress of the work is going. So really allowing for that collaborative environment, kind of taking some of the burden off emails or things like that. We can set the priority level, the start and due dates. We also have custom fields that we can add to these workflow jobs. In this example, I've added a billing code and a description. This again is something that can be customized by an administrator. I can also add files like SOPs or common templates or things like that for people to be able to use as part of the job. So if I look at these tasks a little bit more, each of these tasks kind of correspond to something in that drill core sample processing workflow that we had looked at before. So here, I really want to register those drill core samples. And if we look at the samples that are part of this job, we can see that I've already done this registration. And these are the drill core samples we have. Again, me as an administrator has defined what are the important metadata or fields that we want to capture on drill core samples. I can see where they're located and also where they came from kind of in this grid. If I drill into one of these, I'm also able to see this information kind of for this single sample, as well as if there's any notebooks associated with this work. So any ELNs that have essentially referenced this sample as being part of its work. And I can also see where the sample came from. So in this case, we've got this drill hole 102. If I go to our lineage graph, I can actually see this a little bit more interactively and see where this drill core sample came from. It was this hole from this mine. We also generated composite samples and pulp and this ICP sample at the end. I can interact with this lineage graph and go down maybe to the composite, and we can see that we actually took a composite sample out of sort of 3 crushed drill cores here to really create this lineage. I would be able to see aliquots or assay data associated with this sample. I can see the workflow jobs that this sample has participated in. And so that's sort of that lab meeting demo that we're going to be working off today. And then lastly, we also have the sample timeline. And so this is really getting at the chain of custody of everything that's happened to the sample since it's been registered in the system. And so every event here has an associated user ID as well as a timestamp of what's happened. And for each event, we also can understand, what the updates were. So we can see that, I made an update to the sample ID as well as the purpose of the composite here as well. So we'll go back to sort of this lab meeting demo. And as part of then sort of the next task, we were able to register mass on these drill core samples. And so I'll go to the assays and we can see that we have sort of mass registered here. In this case, I have kind of the same initial and final mass with the recovery percent being calculated, as well as these conditional formats that help highlight when data might be discrepant. So if I do kind of a a sort here, we can see what that looks like when the recovery percentage might be lower than ideal or what we'd want in the lab. And that can really help trigger a QC event where somebody needs to understand, you know, is this worth going on, or do we need to sort of aim to get better recovery for completion of this work? And so each of these steps basically can be assigned to different people. Because I'm doing the demo today, I kind of assign them all to myself. And we can see that the crushing and the mass registration and all of these different sort of steps to finally sort of digest and run the ICP have happened. And this last one also allows me to import data directly from the task. And so in this case, I can go in and say, okay, I've got my ICP data ready. I'm going to do an import. I could manually fill things out, or I could take a file and import it that way. And so this is a file that can be transformed. And so if it's an instrument generated file, we can directly transform it rather than have it be in a tabular format. I'm just going to cancel out of this. As I import the assay data, then it becomes part of the workflow job, and we're able to see sort of the, you know, the final results in this case. And so I've got the different assay types. So in this case, we're measuring for copper and iron with the results. I'm also pulling in some of that metadata via Lineage to be able to understand which drill hole did the sample get associated with, and actually what's the depth of that, so we can really understand as we're charting data what might be the most interesting to go back for. So in this case, we can see that we have sort of our highest iron concentration in this drill hole 104, and our highest copper concentration in this drill hole 103. And so if we look down here, we can actually see that, okay, that's at 250 or 253.1 meters down. So we have some good data now that can help support further processing or decision making at our organization as well. And the last thing that I want to show as part of this is our connected ELN. And so as part of this workflow that we've been doing, we've also been tracking the work in our lab notebook. And this lab notebook is fully integrated into the system, which means that it can recognize data that we have without having to kind of copy and paste too much. And so if you look at this, I can hover over one of these drill core samples and I'm able to get sort of that status of it. I can go in and actually view that sample if I wanted to, and then I can easily sort of go back to my notebook. In organizations that want sort of QC or QA oversight, I can also, after I finish this notebook, I can submit it for review, and somebody can sort of sign off on that from a QC or a regulatory perspective. And so if I go into one of these samples again, one of the other pieces that I wanted to share today is our storage. And so if I go into this location, I'm able to see the overview of what we have sort of in canister 3. We also have kind of like XY box components as things get smaller, and you might be sort of tracing them in vials rather than these sort of large bins. But we've got sort of the overview of this location where we've got big bins with the canisters that essentially are storing up to sort of 100 drill core samples in this case, or other sample types. So it doesn't look like there's any questions so far. I'm going to show a few of our search components and our analysis, but feel free, please, to add questions in the chat and we'll get to them. I'll keep sort of looking out for the questions here. But in order to sort of search for samples, I can easily sort of type in a partial name or a name of a sample and find the samples here. I could also go through and use our individual sort of find samples by ID, or if I'm actually scanning samples, I can find them by barcode as well. Or if I'm not looking for a particular sample, but I'm looking for samples with specific properties, I can use our sample finder tool for this. And so let's say I want to find samples that maybe that have come from, something greater than 50 meters depth, and also has assay data. So that allows me to kind of associate one component, and then maybe here we'll say, well, I also really want to make sure that we have either assay data is present, or maybe in this case, what is the drill core that we have that doesn't yet have mass results? And so now I'm able to look through and start to make a short list of samples that I might need to analyze or process. Potentially, maybe I'm looking for samples from this mine, and so I'm going to make a selection, and I can add these into a pick list. That can also sort of help me put these samples in kind of a shopping cart or a shared location to say, here's the work that we want to do maybe next week or something like that. Okay, let me take a look at the questions here. Yeah, how flexible is the system, and is there sort of a dependency on our employees to help make a change? And the system is very flexible, and so really this is all of the terms and language that you've seen have been defined as me as an administrator. So if you have the right permissions, you can essentially go in and make edits to the different types of fields that you want. You can choose the data types, whether or not that's required or not. You can make sort of these single select, or have additional sort of controlled formatting or regular expressions onto your sample types as well. Does this software have an option to view the skewed CRM standard performance? It's right now we don't have kind of the standard performance. I don't think kind of in our charting, but this is something that we'd be very interested in sort of building on top of. When I'm creating a chart, we have kind of set charts, and we continue to sort of expand the functionality here. And yeah, is it possible to see that turnaround time for samples logged? And so there are possibilities of being able to write sort of custom queries for these turnaround times. We're actually looking at expanding our functionality as well to actually include sort of turnaround times and the workflow job processing times a little bit more readily available. But again, kind of as an administrator, this would be something that you might be able to query the system for and develop your own sort of dashboard on. Is it hosted in the cloud? Yes. So our system is hosted in LabKey's AWS cloud, and this really allows the scientists and the team to be free to do the hard work, and really kind of puts that burden of updating and maintenance on us, which is all included in our subscription of the software. Yeah, and can LabKey connect to ERP software to help track consumables? So yes, it can through our APIs. So we also have robust client APIs that allow you to either pull data out of LabKey for reporting or integration with other tools, or you can push data into LabKey. We do have actually a lot of folks sort of track consumables within our sample types as well. So that could be something that you extend the sample types for. And then in our enterprise version, we also do have integrations with other databases kind of built into the system. So depending on what that ERP software is, we can chat about if that's something that is already built out or not. And yeah, lastly, is there an audit log? There is. So the timeline that I showed for our samples actually is sort of a single sample view of our audit log, but we have more robust audit logs as well that show everything that's happened in the system. And so we can see kind of those sample timeline events, but then we also have our assay events or domain events, which essentially is sort of the tables within the system, as well as sort of the roles or the user events as well. And yes, our system can also be permissioned, more fine-grained. So we have role-based permissioning that allows people to have different roles within the system. That means they can do different things. So as an administrator, you kind of have all the power, but most end users are editors that can basically participate in submitting data or editing data, but cannot, for example, set, a new sample type or things like that. And then we often have a lot of our metallurgy teams sort of separating or segregating data into what we call projects or folders that allow you to partition data specifically for each group. So if there's a drill core processing team, and then there's the metallurgy team, or there are other teams that are participating in the work, each team basically would have their own workspace, and you can hand samples off between teams to be able to sort of have that full traceability of samples. Okay. Looks like I've gotten to most of the questions here. If you have any questions or questions as you watch the recording again or follow up, feel free to please reach out to me. Limitation on assigning users. No, there's no limitation. So actually, this is a really good point. We do not have any limitations on the data that you can add, or the number of fields that you can add, or the number of users. And so our subscription is user-based pricing. And so that's something that we'll sort of account for in that cost. But effectively, you can have as many folks as you need contributing, participating, viewing this data, as well as much data as you need sort of participating in this as well. Okay. So I'll move over to kind of the last slide here. After this, as I mentioned at the beginning, you guys are going to get a recording of this. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to do kind of a more individualized one-on-one demo, really understand kind of what those processes look like for your organization, and how our LabKey LIMS can really help track those for you.